How Did I Get Here? And now here are your hosts, Maudie.
So, where you're a pastor?
Correct.
And where do you now? Where is your congregation? What is your?
Okay, that's interesting because we had been meeting at All Saints Episcopal Church by the college there on 24th, but that's going to go away. So we don't know where we'll meet once this sheltering in place happens. Once that's over with. So more than likely we'll be vagabonds meeting in libraries, bars, wherever we can.
I read your book, A Story of Rhythm and Grace, what the church can learn from rock and roll about healing the racial divide. I'm sorry I didn't read your latest book, but that one was just a little too, it was just that the title was just, I had to read that book.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Amazing book. And it seems you talk about when you're starting a church, you kind of start in almost like a school gymnasium. I remember living outside of Houston in the Woodlands when we attended, before they had an actual place for the Catholic Church, we met in like the junior high lunchroom. Yeah. Primarily when we were starting, we started one in a park in Sherman Oaks with just me and the guitar player, and we met under a tree and we played songs and people gathered and they go, "What are you guys doing here?" Then we told them, and then pretty soon we gathered people and they just wanted to be part of it. Then when we were in Belize, it was quite a different story. We had been down there about 3 months, and I told one person that we were waiting for our personal effects to come down on this shipment, and we were going to go to a hotel and try out and make sure the PA and everything still it worked when we got there. So he asked, "Well, when are you going to do that?" And I said, "Well, Sunday about 10 or 11 or whatever it was." And 40 people showed up. He went out and told everybody it was going to start. And we were not prepared. So it's one of those kind of things where if you have a plan, hold on to it loosely, because there's no guarantee A, it's going to work, and B, that that it's going to work the way you want it. Yeah.
You got to kind of be prepared.
Yeah. I reading your book, man, you talk about Belize. You lived in so many places. Like even Boca Raton. All right, man.
I don't know how that happened. I just seemed to caught on with bands, and then we got stuck and stranded wherever we were. So, and then I was touring during the early years when there weren't that many flights available, and it was problematic to get back and forth. So one time we went to Europe, and I just rented a place there rather than trying to fly back to the States and come back to Europe. And the same was true with living in Macon, Georgia. We were touring a lot, and I wound up in the Atlanta airport all the time trying to make it back to Los Angeles. I figured, well, if I'm going to stay here, I might as well get a place down the road in Macon.
Right.
And it was kind of popping at the time because the Allman Brothers were just ascending to superstart then I moved there just before. I don't know if you're familiar with their work, but Eat a Peach.
Yeah.
That just when that was being recorded and released, we had moved there under the same management. And so, just that's why I have so many addresses. And my friends back home in San Francisco, when I call, they go, "Where do you live now?" That's their first question. "Where are you living now?" And sometimes I'm not sure of the answer.
Yeah.
I have to check my ID.
Well, I like it because it seems like the movement that you like, the journey you're on isn't like running from something. It's going to new places. You know what I mean? Like there is that sort of thing that I think a lot of musicians, we have that sort of like, we got to get the hell out of here kind of, think it's almost one of the reasons why a lot of us get into it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I had never really thought in those terms. So, I don't know if I'm running to, from, or just surfing,
Well, it seems like it's in a good way, like you're running around.
Yeah,
like it's good. Yeah.
It would seem.
Yeah.
And
and kind of providential as well.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up in San Francisco, and when 50s music hit, 60s, 50s, Chuck Berry, guitar players were the rage. Chuck Berry, and then Little Richard to some degree, but Elvis, Chuck Berry, all these. For some reason, I gravitated to the piano and Fats Domino. I had no clue where music was coming from. I didn't know that they were actually made by human beings and little recording studio.
Yeah.
And they were just the big guys, you know.
Yeah.
And so I sat in my room practicing my little Fats Domino piano. And 7 or 8 years later, I'm doing a session in Los Angeles, and while we're waiting for it to start, I start tinkering on the piano, playing my little New Orleans licks. And the guy sitting on another stool goes, "Hey, where you learn how to play that stuff?" And I go, "I don't know. I just picked it up." He goes, "Oh, it sounds good, man." Well, it was Mac. It was Dr. John. So, I mean, we just immediately, we linked or hooked up around this New Orleans style piano playing that I had no idea it came from New Orleans because there was no Google to research things.
Right.
You know, you just,
yeah.
So, and from there, I just kept seeming to meet all the people that I had been influenced by musically.
Yeah, it seems like it.
They found me, or I found them, or I don't know what happened.
There's I'm going to just sidetrack it. There's a great story about you and Dr. John calling you and being like, "Hey, Mick Jagger's over here. Let's go out." And the fact that you got super dressed up and put on your best stuff, and you're like, "I'm going to be like a rock star." Those guys are just hanging out in like jeans and t-shirts and stuff.
Right.
I did that a couple of times, and not with Mick Jagger and Dr. John, but in situations where I was trying to equal someone's cool, and they didn't have to. Yeah, I thought that was a great story.
Excitement is good. It's a good thing. Overexcitement can get you. Yeah.
Well, man, reading this book, I know you have a newer released book that I didn't read, but reading this book in this time was really enlightening, and it's sadly, because we're reliving the same awful stories over and over.
Correct.
You could have written this book in 1965 and it would be the same stuff. Yeah.
So that's
no. Go ahead.
You know, that's the unfortunate perception that we've had, is that every generation is improved, and the reality is, I don't know if improvement is like music. Things become different. You know, I'm not a fan of like jazz era was the epitome, or the 50s or the 70s or the 90s. I think technically the proficiency of musicians today who are 30 years old is way above anything that I heard on the road in the 70s. I mean, just the average. I go in the guitar center. I hear a blistering guitar, and then I walk around the amps, and I see a little kid about 14 on a bench. You know, and he looks at me, and "What are you looking at, old man?" I'm admiring your licks. You don't know what I'm thinking. I'm thinking if you would have played that well, you know, in 1971, you'd be rich.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
So, but as far as the evolution and the progression of interpersonal relationships, it seems like we've always found a way to not get along with each other. You know, just as we do it over different things, but at some level, there's just this thing in humanity, and it's not just about race in America. It's historical, and we just tribalize and get in herds, and we want to fight, and we'll, you know, any old excuse will do. Yeah.
So how have these last, I guess, almost 4 weeks been for you?
Well, John, it's been. I've not been paying attention to the news because I'm in another book called Funknology, where I'm trying to. The first book was about race in relationship to the church.
Yeah.
The second book was about, it's the same subject, but it was another take on it about art, the beauty in you and the beauty in people living with a disabled condition, and just seeing humanity as something beautiful, like a work of art. Then the third one was more about, in a theological sense, if we have these 10 commandments that a lot of Christians hold dear, what are we going to do with them? So I came from that angle. Now this one's a little bit more scientific and musical, and funk music is where I kind of lived, and I just even what Dr. John was playing, he thought it was funk, and then I was involved with Sly, and then I did 4 albums with the Parliament Funkadelic. And so I'm kind of
you're a funk guy. Yeah. Yeah, man.
And so I thought, since I'm that, I might as well come from that angle. And that funk, as you know, is just, it's a feeling. It can be one note, it can be 100. Yeah. And everybody knows when it's funky. You look around and everybody smiles, and it just happens every once in a while. And so I thought that they're just like meeting a friend, that the funk of it would be a topic where we could address getting down to the old school nitty gritty, and just strip things away about philosophical, political, and just say, what's at the heart of this? Why are we having a problem? And if you have a problem just because you don't like the culture, just be honest about it. It's much better to have an honest discussion than have one where you're polite. Politeness, trying to be polite and choose your words and mince things and not be seen as a bad person because you don't like this, you're not a bad person if you don't like it. The only thing you're a bad person if you like the Rolling Stones better than the Beatles.
Yeah.
But other than that, most things other than that can be forgiven. And that's an old joke. But I'm sorry, I dropped that one. It just came out.
Well, I view the Stones Beatles thing like you do in your book. Like Mick said, like the Stones are great at being the Stones and the Beatles are great at being the Beatles.
That proves.
I have to very quickly acknowledge our mutual friend Lonnie Trevino, who introduced us. I have to thank him. I'm so glad that I delving into your career as an artist and as a musician. Dude, it's jaw-dropping. I mean, it's jaw-dropping. Looking as a musician, looking at your musical career, it's making the hair on my arms stand up. The people you've gotten to share that experience with are some of the ones that we hold in the highest esteem.
Well, I think there's a generational thing there. There's one thing that people don't understand, and that is I came of age just at the transition from big bands, Frank Sinatra, singing groups, doo-wop groups, and then all of a sudden the Beatles hit. Within 2 years, there was a new world for everybody. There had never really been bands before, where there were bands, where guys, and I had this picture in my mind being a record company exec. Because in the old days, I played with Lou Rawls and Wilson Pickett, these kind of people. And, the musicians in the band were just, sometimes I don't think they knew their names. There's just some guy over there with a horn or a guitar. They could care less. Yeah. If you didn't show up, they just call the union and get somebody else.
Right.
And, and so the record companies used to dealing with people like that. So they got Elvis there and they're saying, okay, Elvis, we got a songwriter over here at the Brill Building. We want you to record 2 of their songs, but you got to give us 25% back. So then they run over to the songwriter and say, we'll get Elvis to record your song. Well, you got to give us 25% back. So then they've got this triangulation deal going. And then, so that's the modus of operandi. They're used to that. And so I envision this time when some record company exec sitting in his office and 4 guys walk in and he goes, well, I can get you the same songwriters that Elvis used. And thank you. Yeah. Well, I can get you the producer over there that Frankie Valli used. No, thank you. And no, thank you right now. And so they're saying, well, what can I how can I get a percentage of it? They go, you can't.
Yeah.
We're going to write the songs. We're going to sing the songs. We're going to arrange the songs. And we're going to give you the product.
Yeah.
And we'll sign the deal at 10% on 90, and that's the end of it. And so it was kind of a different era. And so all of a sudden, the record companies were out looking for bands, and I just happened to be in San Francisco. And they came to San Francisco looking for bands. So next thing I know, the bands that I've been in teenage competitions with, Battle of the Bands, like Creedence Clearwater when they were the Gollywogs, 14 years old, next thing I know, they're selling out arenas, and Carlos Santana and these kind of, all these, we were just kids running around the same neighborhood. Bill Graham came in and picked it up and made some of them commercially viable. Yeah. But even at that, traveling around, that was the era of a lot of festivals. Woodstock wasn't the only one. Right. There were several of them. The Atlanta Pop, Mari Soul was the last one, which I did. And, you would play these gigs and all of the bands that were traveling were there. Yeah. So, you're hanging out, and one day, depending on where you were slotted, you would see David Bowie, and you're hanging out there, and there's David Bowie sitting there, and so you go talk to David. And so it was more like, in the parallel would be the NBA. At any given time, there's 300 or 400 people that have those jobs. Right. They all know each other. They've been competing each other the 3 or 4 years they were in college or whatever it is. Everybody knows everybody. So you walk up to somebody, Bob Dylan? Yeah, I know Bob Dylan. What they hear is, oh, you're Bob's friend. Right. You can go over to Bob's house. And what you're really saying is, no, we're in the same management. And I walked in the office, and we've had meetings, and we passed each other in the hall. And at any given time, he may have recognized my face and put a name with it. But as the time elapsed, he probably wouldn't know me from the cab driver that he had at the last Grammy show. That's kind of thing. But that was the reality at the time. It was exciting. Everybody was 22, 23 years old, and it was uncharted territory. People were making lots of money. My friend Dallas Taylor said, I was a millionaire at 21. I had no idea what to do with that kind of money. Wow. And he was with Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. Right? Yeah. He was. Yeah. It's interesting. His name made it on the front of the album, didn't it, on that record? I'm not sure. Can I ask you this? This is just an aside, because this is something that I've sort of noticed with the digital revolution. Like, once stuff moved to iTunes, then once stuff moved to streaming, a kid like me, I'm 51, I grew up like with records, and like I knew who Jim Keltner was when I was like 9. Wow. You know what I mean? Like, I knew who Russ Kunkel was. I knew who Lee Sklar was. They were on all these records I listened to. You're like, wait a minute, these guys are, you know what I mean? And there's a whole sort of currency in that, and that's how guys that play bass in bands and in so many projects like you did, that's your calling card. And that's sort of, that part of the whole music industry is kind of gone. You don't know who played bass on the Lady Gaga song. Yeah, the unfortunate thing, my career was a little bit different than that. I started playing with Etta James and Lou Rawls and Wilson Pickett and the Soul Review kind of thing. And I learned real quick that longevity wasn't going to be, I got the gig with the Four Tops primarily because they call a union. What they did at the time was travel with a guitar player, and they would call a union and get people who could read music, and I could read. And so I met them at this place, and they put the charts down. We did the gig. I said, you want to do the rest of the tour? So I said, yeah. By the time I got to the next city, they had fired the guitar player and sent him back to Detroit, and I was now the music director. Oh. So, it was kind of, so I knew that wasn't it. So I had gone to New York with Etta. She left us here. Pickett picked up our whole band, and we finished his tour. And I came back to San Francisco, and I thought, I don't want to get another gig. I don't want to be a hired gun. I want to get in a band.
Oh yeah.
So we started a band called 6/8 Paradox, and
Okay.
we would play at this place called Winchester Cathedral down in Redwood City. And it was us, and Sly had just started a band, and he named it the Family Stone. So we would play the first set, and then about 2:00 in the morning, the doors would bust open, and they would come in with all these different instruments, and sometimes they'd show up in pajamas, and it was just so much energy. You knew they were gone. Right. You knew they were gone, and so I knew that's it. That's what I want to be in a band. I want to be in a band, and so we started a band called Leon's Creation, and we cut a record, and it went number one. That single went number one in the Bay Area, and Sly came in and signed us, but during that time we were starving. To be in an original band in a nightclub situation, everybody wanted to hear the hits. People used to work 6 nights a week in the same bar.
Right.
9. Okay. Yeah. And they didn't hire original bands. I went in to see Sly and them one time, and there were more people on stage than there were in the audience. And with Sly and the Family Stone, within a short while, within a year, they were going to have dance and music and be gone.
Yeah.
But it was this little club in Fireside. Nobody knew because they were playing songs no one recognized.
Right.
The same with us. And so I used to have to fly back and forth to Los Angeles to do sessions to make money, to stay in the band. But my focus was always in the band. And so because of that, I never cared about credit is where I was going.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of stuff that I'm uncredited for, a lot. More stuff I'm uncredited for than I am credited by a 3 to 4-1 margin.
Sure.
So
that doesn't bother you?
I'm sorry?
That doesn't bother you, though?
Well, it didn't until maybe about 3 years ago.
Okay.
No, it doesn't bother me. It didn't bother me at the time because I wanted to be in a band, but sometimes you hear yourself and you tell somebody, and now because of Google, people will Google and they'll argue with you.
Yeah.
And I'll go, oh, wait a minute. So Mac's book, we did the Exile on Main Street record. What's in the book wasn't more than just hanging out at the bar with Chuck Berry. We actually went into this recording studio, and the whole band did something on Exile on Main Street. Wow. And only 4 of us got credit, 4 of them. And also they recorded one of Mac's songs, and they didn't give him credit. They just changed the name. And maybe I'm saying too much. But he was mad at them for a long time till this book came out. And he goes, Jimmy, I want to thank you. He says, I was mad at them for a long time. They didn't give us credit. He says, but you brought up that story, and you reminded me how much fun it was, and fun's a heck of a lot better, and I don't need the credit anymore. So, session guys, that's their calling card. I wanted to be in a band, and you can appreciate this. I can't sing a lick. Okay. I'm a bass player. Yet I've signed a record contract 3 times to major labels, twice to Atlantic and once to Columbia. Who does that? It's very difficult. Even people who are multi-talented with songwriting, singing, they have the whole package. Still getting a record deal to a major label is a feat.
Yeah.
And somehow I managed to pull it off 3 times, and because that's what I was focused on.
Right.
Yeah.
What was the band Creation? That was another band that you had, and that was on Atlantic as well?
Yeah, that was on Atlantic twice and Columbia once.
Okay.
And we sold about 72 records and given away about 300 and I'm more proud of that than anything else I've done.
Yeah. Because it was yours and you're a band guy.
Yeah. And I had everybody I grew up with. Leon Patillo is a Christian musician. Do you know him?
No. I just remember from your book.
And Barry Frost. And Frosty was here. He lived here as a drummer. Yeah. And Jerry Peterson. Just a lot of, it was really good situation for me.
Yeah. One of my big regrets of this podcast, because I've been doing it since 2011 and talking to musicians, is that all of my friends that were like, "Hey, have you gotten Frosty on?" And I'm like, "No, I was really intimidated by Frosty. I just was. I just was." And they'd be like, "Go up and talk to him," because he was doing a weekly thing here at the Continental Club Gallery. And I'd go up and start talking to him, but I would just be scared to ask him. Yeah. And then, he was such an amazing, amazing musician. He was a very kind man. He was never mean or anything. He just, sometimes when someone's a badass, sometimes it makes you feel a little,
Well, maybe I've known him since grade school when I used to see him playing with a Superman cape. That kind of changes your perspective.
Totally. Totally.
Running up and down the street with a sword.
Well, I mean, guys like you and him, I was a little kid listening to Sly and the Family Stone. You know what I mean? And that music, like just the fact that you guys could be part of this in some way is so huge to someone that's such a huge fan like me.
Yeah, and there's an interesting aside in that we're both on this one record that Sly did, uncredited, and I wasn't sure. I didn't know he was on it till I got here, till we moved here, and we were talking one day. He goes, "Oh yeah, that was Buddy and I were down there, and Sly." Because you had to understand, when Sly moved to Los Angeles, the Family Stone didn't move with him. Oh. So he had this house down there, and he was just recording all the time. And if you were there, you recorded, and you were never sure. There wasn't like an official session. And his mode of, he would have a electric drums that was new, drum machine. Mm-hmm. He just started using it. So you have a drum machine and maybe a keyboard, and he would tell you, "Play to the track." And I go, "There's no track." He goes, "Sure there is. There's a track." I go, "What do you want me to do?" "Do whatever you want. There's a track." And I go, when we go back and forth, what's the lyric? What's the melody? What's anything? And he didn't want it. I didn't realize at the time, he didn't know either. And he just was hoping somebody would give him a line that he could build on.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's.
I know you still talk to his brother, right? Are you in communicate? I know that you communicated in the book. You talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. We were still trying to do things up until as recently as 2010. What we had done was we had put half the Family Stone, Cynthia, Freddie, and Jerry, and Greg, the drummer, and the other half of Creation. So we'd combine both bands, and we tried that for a year, tried to get it off the ground, but it didn't happen.
Oh, it's too bad.
Yeah.
So let me ask you some other stuff. When you started going out and playing, you were what, 14?
My first record was 15, yeah.
And did you go out and play? You went out and you played shows at we went out, bars and stuff, and you were like this fit.
Yeah, we played some bars, but mainly dances and parties and that. And then we had a hit. One of the songs took off that Sly wrote, and so Bobby Freeman had the hit, and it was called "Do You Want to Dance?"
Right.
No, not "Do You Want to Dance?" I'm sorry, "The Swim."
Right.
So it was "The Swim," and surfing and.
Is that this dance, the swim?
Yeah, that was a dance.
Yeah. Okay.
So, we did a tour with the Jan and Dean and the Safaris, Wipeout. And that's the first time I'd ever seen that kind of situation where, there's 4,000 or 5,000 kids and you go and play. So the only thing I really remember about that was the guitar player just knocked me out. Oh man, that guy was playing. You'd hear him between sets. It was Glenn Campbell.
Yeah.
And years later, you're watching TV. Oh, it's that guy.
Yeah. What an amazing musician that guy.
He sure was.
So can I go back to Etta James and Lou Rawls tour? Yeah. Was it like there's a band and you like a bandstand, and then they would come out like in front of you guys, almost like the Oscars, or like?
Okay, everything was different for Etta. She didn't have very much stature. She'd had a hit in the mid '50s or late '50s, and she was playing bars, and so it was our band backing her up.
Okay,
and but Pickett at the time he had a great big band, like 12 or 13 pieces. So we're in New York playing a club, maybe like the Continental Club, a little smaller. Mm-hmm. And Etta got us fired. And Pickett came in one night and said, I just fired my band. What am I going to do? And I can't remember who said it, but we just quit. What are we going to do? We just quit Etta because she was doing things that would make her inconsistent.
Right.
And so he said, well, you finish our tour? So we finished out his tour. But generally with the Four Tops, and especially Lou Rawls, he had a music director, and they would have charts, and they would just call the union. It would be like the Oscars, or
right.
And
right.
They'd get 10 or whoever was around, and they would play, and everybody would just come in, sight read, and leave.
Yeah, I had that sort of like mid-late 70s Lou Rawls live album. I don't know if it was like Lou Rawls Live or Live Lou or something like that, but he had like, by that time he had like the You'll Never Find, like with the strings and stuff and everything, a killer band. So in those times when you traveled and stuff, you know what? I'm thinking about a time when you told a story about going back to Arkansas when you were a kid and sort of like seeing how different the race relations were in the South than to where you were in San Francisco at the time, right?
Oh yeah, it was completely different. And sadly it was, I wasn't as old. My older brother he was impressionable, so it hit him harder than it hit me. But, I just thought you play differently. And instead of being able to go to the park and hang out, we'd go to the creek and roll tires and have, foot races. But going into town, it was weird to not be able to go into a market without a note. You had to go in, you had to have a note from your parent for specific things. You walk into the white market, you weren't allowed to linger. You had to go in and get your items, show them and give them the money and leave. And the theater that was an experience, having to sit upstairs and had a separate entrance. And the water faucets, well, there weren't any water faucets to speak of, but where there were, they had a big sign over it, one white, one colored, and writing in the back of the bus. Those things I experienced, and it wasn't.
What years were those?
See, it would have been 61, 62.
Right before the civil rights movement. And
no, actually, it was in full swing.
It was in full swing.
I think, but that was a gradual process. If you look at Emmett Till, what year was that? 56. He got killed, and that kind of sparked the civil rights movement. It hadn't even stopped by 1972. And in Dr. John's band, there were places that I wasn't allowed. The whole band would go in, and I had to sit in the car because they didn't allow coloreds in the places at the time. So was that in the South? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you talk about doing gigs in Vegas and having to go stay in a different.
Yeah, that was 1970, I think.
Yeah.
And there was an irony in that Sly had played there 2 years earlier, and they had to leave real fast for getting in trouble, and we didn't know that that had happened.
Right.
We had the same management. He was our man. They sent us over, and they gave us. We looked the same, sounded the same, and it was really bad. So it was an 8-hour gig, and each band would play 1 hour. So you wound up playing 4 hours each.
Okay.
You alternate sets, and we played, and they ran us out just like they did. We were doing originals, and nobody liked it. Boo, get out of here. And so I think we didn't even fulfill our contract. What I didn't realize was 2 years later, I had some roommates in Los Angeles. They were the other band.
Oh, really?
We were talking. Yeah, we played the Pussycat a Go-Go. Yeah, what year did you play it? Oh, we were some other name. I said, well, we were Creation. Really? So we had met through Lenny and Frosty, actually. And so we become roommates at that time.
That's awesome. I know you haven't been keeping up with the news because you're finishing your book. I totally understand. But you're cognizant that there's some kind of movement going on.
Oh, yes. Totally.
Yeah. How do you see this? Because you've lived through quite a few, what I would call awakenings.
Yes, that's a good word. And the intensity is nowhere near what it was in the 60s. It's not close. So, from what I've seen, what little bit I've seen, it's not really a repeat. It's more a redo, but not a repeat. If we can draw a distinction, like a repeat would be the same public outrage en masse, and a redo would be just growing your hair long into a Beatle do, and we're going to be a Beatle band. It's more of a mimic than it is really a groundswell where people are really feeling passionately about the issue. And, it kind of makes me, at some level, I think it's going to take a new conversation rather than trying to protest about certain issues and reform. I think we really need to think about doing things differently and completely different.
How do you mean?
Well, just think about the terminology we've used so far in our podcast, civil rights. Well, our country is a lot about rights, the Bill of Rights. And so we think rights are important. And they are, and I'm not to diminish that. I want to have the right to go into a market without a note and all those things. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't change how the people in the market feel about me. Just because I can go in there doesn't mean once I'm in there that everybody's going to go, oh, where is he? Just think of racial social distancing. So the good thing about COVID, if there's a good thing, good takeaway, is white people finally know what it's like for other white people to keep their distance. Like they're finally able to experience what's normal to me. Yeah. That you don't get too close to that person. In this instance, they may have a germ, but when they see a black male, don't get too close because he's probably violent. Yeah. And if he gets too close within arm's reach, who knows what it'll do. And that's been the experience of somebody who looks like me, especially if you're young. I don't think anybody, I'm well past the age of somebody worrying about me doing something to them. But, for somebody in their 30s, walking around and dressed a certain way, people look at them as suspect.
Right.
And so, now that people have been able to experience what it's like to have fear first because we're afraid of this germ, they may be more receptive to be empathetic. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. It might make sense to them. Prior to that, it didn't make sense because it would just sound like, oh, you people, you're always complaining. We've given you your rights. What more do you want? Everything's fixed. Why? So if things are fixed, why do you keep complaining? And they were looking at it a legal, political way, and I'm looking at it a sociological way.
Right.
Where if it's not normal or normative to have intimacies and to intermingle and live in the same neighborhoods, then that's what I'm shooting for. Rights are one thing, but we will socialize and be intimate with someone. And let's not have skin color be the first why do you attract to this verse? Well, I like him because they're a Beatle fan. I like this one because there's do that before us as well. I'm supposed to hang out with him because he's black, or I'm supposed to hang. And you're both sitting there, and you're listening to the song, and you hate it. He's a truck driver, and you're a college professor, and you think because you're black, you're supposed to be hanging out.
Right.
Well, we don't do that. That's not how human beings function. We function according to affinities. When you see a band, you see, it'd be odd to see a band with two classical musicians because they wouldn't know. A funk band, you look to the left and there are two cello players,
Right.
That just doesn't happen. You mesh, you blend for a reason. That's all I'm asking is just don't make it all be about race. Choose your friends, your relationships, where you go for different reasons. It's because you want to be there. So that's what my writing's about.
Yeah. Well, I also get the idea that while that you view that healing can come from arts, music, literature, visual art.
I'm sorry?
I gathered from reading just the one book that you believe that the arts and religion obviously the arts have basically that maybe it's the job of the arts and the churches to do that on a personal level, sort of like enact that change.
Well, for me, and from my perspective, all meaningful change has to come at levels where commerce is not happening. And capitalism or our economic system is based on competition. And I think competition is good. I think it brings out the best. One of the things we used to do in my era of music was very competitive. You'd hear somebody in a bar and you'd go home and practice. You'd watch your fingers and you want to go home because you want to come back and cut them.
I still do that. Huh? I still do that. I still come home from shows and we'll stay up for like 3 hours. And
it just kind of brings out the best in everybody. And there's nothing, it kind of elevates, bring your game. But the downside of that is, in the socioeconomic level, is if you can find benefit in a racial group, in a closed group, then you'll keep it closed because it behooves you to do that because your livelihood depends on it.
Right.
So the arts, to a degree, are not like that, and neither should the church. We're all, in one sense, art brings beauty, and the other sense, God brings a different kind of beauty, but a social beauty, where at a relational level, either relation with God or a relationship with other people of God. So you get a chance at that level not to be competitive, and where there's no competition, where you're not trying to get a gig or this or that. You have a better chance to look at somebody and say, yeah. So in that context, I think arts has a better chance and a role to play, and so does church. But you can see even in the arts, I didn't realize when I first moved to Los Angeles, and there were definite cliques of people who were making records.
Right.
And after time went away, I thought it was musical style, but I'd see a lot of cross. Then I realized it was drugs. If you liked one type of drug, all those guys would be hanging out together because they needed each other to go procure them. And they didn't like, the alkies didn't like the potheads, and the potheads didn't like the pill heads, and the pill. Can I say these things? I guess I already did.
Of course.
And and so you would just see people that would, and so you would the takeaway is that there are always these affinities that draw people together. And at some level, we need to look at what we have in common, what we enjoy together, and gravitate to each other because of that, if that makes sense.
It does. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this. Can you talk about your transition, your career transition from bass player, like performing and music business guy, to pastor, and sort of like what that looked like to you? Like when you were like in the early 70s, what did you think you would be doing later on?
In the early 70s?
Yeah, like did you see yourself as a
pastor? I thought I would be a record company exec.
Okay.
And that was promised to me in so many words. You know, I produced both of our the second and third record, and Jerry Wexler over at Atlantic thought kind of highly of me.
That's amazing.
And, I'm sorry?
That's awesome.
And so he had, the reason the second album came about, I was in Dr. John's band. He goes, well, you know, what are you going to do with your life? And I said, well, I got this band back in San Francisco. And he goes, oh, well, why don't you? And so I did, you know, and he goes, you know, when you're finished playing, you can come and produce other acts, or that was kind of the understanding. So I thought that's what I'd be doing. And when the third album didn't happen, when Columbia didn't release it, I had Mac on that, and Garth, and a couple of the other band guys, and Ricky Lee Jones, and a bunch of people on that record, and they didn't release it. We got dropped, and I went on the tour. I went on the road with Buddy Miles a little bit, and you know, I was doing the same thing that I was doing 12 years earlier,
sure.
Playing that look, and I couldn't see doing that. So I didn't know what to do with myself. So we went back to California, and I decided to clean up my act. And I was down in the beach in Southern California, and it said there's this church up there called Hope Chapel. So I walked through the doors. It was really abrupt, but there was a couple other little things in there. I'd kind of I developed a pretty good. I decided I'd be real smart and not take drugs and just drink.
Oh, okay.
And but what I didn't think about was not that didn't mean starting at 7 a.m.
Right.
So I developed a pretty good habit, and so.
Did you totally clean up your act? You stopped drinking completely, or?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have not had. 1982, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Outside of communion, it's never.
Right.
And even then, you know, I'm a little bit hesitant, but I have to because I'm the guy, you know. So that's I've always found a little humor in that.
Yeah. What about what made you write this? This was the first book that you wrote, A Story of Rhythm and Grace?
That was the first one, right?
What prompted that?
I was working at a church outside of Washington, D.C. There was something called the Emergent Movement. And this guy, Brian McLaren, had become a popular author of this young movement where this one generation was going to reform Christianity across America. And it was taking off. And I just come back from Belize and was disenchanted with what the church as I saw it in America. I didn't think it was ecumenical enough. I didn't think it was inclusive enough. And I thought, you know, I'm still an old hippie at heart, and I believe in love and I believe in peace. And by goodness, I'm going to go pursue it. So we went from Boca up to Washington, took the church primarily because Brian's work was around flying in and flying out. He had become such a huge author, successful author, that he was speaking every other week. So my job was to basically pastor his church while he could fly around all over the world and do his book promotion. then after a while, I watched them. I thought, that's probably what I should be doing, because I'm starting to get a little long in the tooth, and pretty soon they're not going to want to see me as a pastor up there speaking. And what am I going to do after that? Well, you should write a book. Have you ever written a book before? No. Have you ever taken any writing classes? No. But I thought, I see him do it. So like any kind of musician that learns by watching somebody else do it, I shot off a proposal to all these book companies, not knowing it was just as daunting a task to get signed to a book, probably more than even a record label.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I said, I sent them off, and all of a sudden I got a call from this guy, Rodney Clapp, and he goes, I was interested in your proposal. That book's still available? And I almost wanted to go, oh yeah, let me check. But I said, yeah, and I got signed, and so now I feel like I've crossed over to being an author. I'm not a writer yet, but I'm an author.
This is going to be the one you're working on now. Is your fourth?
Fourth, yeah. And then I have one in the hopper, a novel, and hopefully that will be the money maker. And at some point, you have to start making money. Right now, I'm just bubbling beneath the jazz musician. The person who decided, Ornette Coleman was right. We got to bring that music back.
Yeah. My aunt always is like, oh, you should write a book. And I'm like, man, I don't need another job that doesn't pay, man. I just don't. But you really you're just a quick selling on this book. The flow of it is amazing. And how you tackle one subject going back and forth through time and stuff is just really, really easy to read and engaging.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So what do you play music in the church as well? I saw a lot of photos of that. Some?
You in Facebook?
No. I mean, like with your church, like in a church band?
Yeah, I did, but primarily keyboards.
Okay.
Or guitar. I hadn't played bass until I didn't even own a bass till I moved here. Then when we started the Stone Creation, I went and got a couple of basses and started practicing again. And then, I look at it, but I have all these books and all these basses in this room now. When I walk in, I can't bring myself to go and, practice 3 or 4 hours any longer. It just doesn't. It's not there. And to be honest, I have to put on my resume that I'm a musician, but that word means something else to me. A musician to me is somebody who's devoted to their craft, trying to make a living at it, and they live and breathe, and they're thinking, they're absorbed the same way I am with on the religion side.
Right.
And that's what I in my mind, if I call myself a musician and know that I'm not working at it, I'm kind of belittling what it means to be a musician, because in my mind, musicians, they deserve not only more remuneration, but a lot of respect. I don't think the average person knows how many hours people put in for that 7 minutes or 20 minutes they hear on a song. And, they want to say, well, I wasn't worth $5,000. Well, you're not paying for the $5,000 for that 7 minutes. There's about 18 more years back there of doing this and doing that and practicing this and doing this. And it's the same formula for a doctor. You walk in and, you're paying for their expertise that they managed to get over a long period of time. And I think most people, when they see someone who's never tackled an instrument, when they see someone playing it, they look at it like riding a bike or having another hobby, going down to the park and shooting baskets. They don't realize how difficult it is to master an instrument to the point where you can not only make music, but it's effortless for the person and it's easy on the ear. No,
Right.
it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've just lost my train of thought when you said that easy on the ear. Do you listen to new music now? Like, is there stuff that you connect with and you're like, oh, I like this person or this kind of song?
No, I just like anything I hear that I'm able to hear.
Okay.
But I live in such a sheltered community and such a sheltered life. I don't get to hear, I don't go out too much here. And I don't want to, I just don't have the time to
I understand.
go out. But I loved your band.
Thank you.
I thought, yeah, it's really good. And Lonnie's band is excellent.
Oh yeah, excellent band.
And there's just so many good players here. Like I said earlier, I can't believe how musicianship has elevated over the last 20 or 30 years. And,
you think it's because of all the tools that people have?
yeah, I do, actually.
I mean, there was some... Sorry, go ahead.
No, in some ways, in some respects, I think there's an upside and a downside, like to most things. I think a lot of people if you can take lessons on YouTube and watch people's fingers, what I used to have to watch from a distance, and then, or when you were learning by records, having to put the thing back.
Oh God, yeah.
Go through that, and you can get things transcribed, and you can get you can move along much quicker at a technical level.
Yeah.
The downside is there's the understanding level may have suffered, and then the willingness to jump out and try something new may have suffered, because it's not really the competition is so fierce just numerically that you don't want to be a creation, just come up with 2 or 3 original sets, because you'll never eat. Yeah. you try to put a band together in this. I played the 1-to-1 bar with, so Frosty and I backed up this female singer down there, and we got a guitar player. I don't know if you know him, excellent guitar player. His name Jacob Hildebrand.
I know that name, but no, I don't know.
Okay. So we played the first set, 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, whatever it was, early. So Frosty and I are standing out in front of the place, and we want to talk to Jacob. He goes, no, I gotta go learn my parts for the next band. I'm in all 3 bands.
Right. Yeah.
I gotta go refresh he went to the car and listened for the turnover. That cracked me up.
Yeah. That's like Chris Gebhardt. He shows up at Skyrocket gigs and he's just hanging out in between the sets listening to something. You're like, what are you doing? He's like, learning the tunes for the gig I have tomorrow.
Okay.
And you're like, okay, all right.
Right.
Yeah, there is that sort of like that hustling sort of like play with anyone you possibly can to try and make it.
Correct. Yeah, and I don't know that I don't know if it was just the era, just because of the Beatle influence being the songwriters and that may have passed by this disco era. Who knows?
Yeah. It's also tough. Like, it's tough to be in a band after you're 30, like the kind of band you have when you're in your 20s, because there's other life stuff that people have to, When you're 22, everyone will live in one house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because we did it twice. Yeah. What I didn't realize that most of the bands that I knew that like Chicago became friends of ours when I was in Rare Earth, and they were telling me stories when they moved out. They were living in 2 cars, and one person had a hotel room. And I just imagine they had it so much better than we. And then we started the Stone creation. Jerry was telling me, Jerry Martini, the saxophone player in Sly's band, they left San Francisco and they were they had the first album out, and I just imagined they were rich.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't know the record company put them on a hotel club in New York called the Electric Circus or something like that. I don't know what the name of it was, something like that. But they were in 2 rooms, all 7 of them, sharing and buying soup and taking the subway. And I'm back in San Francisco, with my head down. Oh man, we got to play this bargain. They done made it, and we didn't know what it was really like. And then we found out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Sleeping on the floor. We had one house when we put Creation together that the trumpet player slept under the kitchen table. Put a mattress under there and then hide it. Yeah, so. Those are the best times, though.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're doing just whatever that couple of hours a day that you're on that stage, it's all worth it.
Yeah. But then life does get in the way. It has a nasty habit.
It does. Yeah. You start having other things that become important. Your new book, it's called Funktology?
Funknology, but it won't be out. My new book is called Sounds of Love and Grace. The one that's available now that came out in February.
Wait, no. The Art of God, right? Oh, the Sounds of sorry. Sounds of Love and Grace. You're right. Sorry.
Sounds of Love and Grace. Yeah.
I'm telling you the book that you wrote and when it came out. Sorry about that. That was weird.
That's okay.
That's the one that's currently out, and that one covers. What's the focus of that one?
The last one?
Yes.
Yeah, it's about the 10 Commandments.
Right.
Not an explanation of them, but an application for them. And once again, there's an artistic motif and also like a sociological history. There's some history, a lot of sociology, a little theology, and a little music. It's pretty. I've tried to keep those threads consistent through all of my writing, because I think not only are they me and where I've been, but I think they're an important part of culture.
Yeah.
I don't think there is any American culture without music. No. I don't think there is any American culture without religion. And I think both of those are actually more important than politics, but that's just me. But as far as defining what an American is, and then, I think that some of the problems we have could be solved if we loosen up a little bit. And both of those, religion and music, does cause you to be a little bit looser.
Yeah.
And enjoy life and slow down and not be so concerned about if your political candidate. To see people argue about political candidates that they'll never meet and get so emotionally invested when they could go down to the 1-to-1 bar and hear a great singer. To me, that's a no-brainer. I'd rather be at the 1-to-1 bar and hear some art, coming through and soothe my soul. So
yeah, on a personal note, my dad and I aren't speaking now for a few months because of that. His ideology views me as an enemy, and he doesn't want me to infiltrate his his scene.
Yeah,
that's a troubling thing, but it's a troubling thing just in our society, not just with him. You know what I mean?
Correct. Oh,
like just totally. The fact that I'm not the only guy whose dad's not talking to him right now, because he's viewed as the enemy. But what are there any parting words? I'm gonna put a list of all the links to your stuff. People can find you at JimiCalhoun.com. They can find your books on Amazon. I got the Kindle version of that book, and I'll be reading more. I'm very thankful to Lonnie for hooking us up. I got a lot out of A Story of Rhythm and Grace, a lot, and
thank you.
Yeah, and your message is very positive. It's very good, and it seems you're very honest too. There's some things that you point out in a very honest way, like some things you don't know if they can change. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a real sort of like a very honest view of it.
Yeah. But see, you appreciate it because you're a musician, and you hear a lick, you go after it, or, you hear a style of music just because, it's overwhelming. The musician doesn't go, oh, that's too hard. I want to do it, but I won't do it because, I might not. You start practicing and see if you can and see if you can get there. There's some people whose chops, up front.
Yeah.
Are inaccessible. I'm never going to be that good, but you don't stop.
No.
It's the same with life. There are things that are insecurities and fears we all have and preferences. And my message is to hold on to those and hold dear to them, but love others enough to let them have theirs.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. It's real simple to me.
Yeah. Well, I think
that's still was getting a hit record, and that allude.
Speaking of which, you are friends with Gabriel Rhodes.
I beg your pardon?
Are you friends with Gabriel Rhodes? Right? Are you friends with Gabe Rhodes? Yeah. He and I have been writing and recording a tune for the last couple weeks.
Oh yeah. That's a special person to me.
Yeah. How do you guys know each other?
I went and I think I sat in with, he may have been playing with either Bill Carter or, I'm trying to remember the guitar player, Tommy Taylor and whatever.
Jeff Blankenhorn?
Holt.
Oh, yeah, Holt. Yeah.
And so I think I sat in there one night and me and Frosty or something, and I took a little bit of a solo and showed some of the old chops, and because in the bands Frosty and I used to have, we would both take long extended solos. Mm-hmm. That was what kind of, we were the we had a running competition in the band to see. We were competitors within the unit.
Right.
Some nights I would take a solo and everybody, they would pay attention to me and not him, and vice versa. So there was always this little bit of a tension. We knew we worked together, but there was this little bit of a tension. When I was away from him, I got more notoriety. When he was away from me, he got more.
Right.
When we got together, then we had to split it.
Yeah.
So that's how I knew Gabe. And then I kind of followed him, and when I would see him play, and I liked the way he carried himself.
Yeah.
And I liked his talent. And the major thing is he just seemed to not only feel the music, but I mean, he's just in a zone when he plays, and that's what music is to me. I don't know him that well, but I get the feeling it would be the same guy if there were 3 people in the audience or 300,000. He would be doing the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's it to me. That's where I'm at.
He's a special person, and over the years, I met him playing on one of his mom's records that he was producing, and she was doing a couple of tunes of mine on the record, and he and I just hit it off. Yeah, totally. Just best friends. It's great. But Jimmy, I've really enjoyed talking to you a lot. You really are an inspiration, both musically and as a human being on this earth, spreading love.
Yeah. That's what it's about. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, people can find you at JimiCalhoun.com. I'll put links to your stuff in the body of the text of this podcast. And thank you so much for doing the show. And thank you for being you. People can find your books, the latest one, The Art of God, or The Sounds of Love and Grace. Sorry. Once again, I'm getting the title wrong.
All right.
Yeah, I'll put links to all of this on there. And thank you so much again for doing this.
Thank you, my friend.
Yeah.
the funny thing, we don't know what we're doing here. This is a fact of life. This is a fact of life. We live for today and hope for tomorrow. This is a fact of life. This is a fact of life.
All we know is someone created us. Sight unseen, in him we put all our trust.
So we keep marching on, hoping for a time that somebody somewhere will say, lay down your burdens, everything's gonna be fine. Hoping, scheming, wishing, cheating, lying, jiving, trying to define which our lives were based upon. Which keeps us growing strong. Talking about the facts. Yeah, yeah, yeah. 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 Talking about the facts about facts. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Talking about the facts. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Talking about